Hi there. Going to be doing some brainstorming today for a new novel. I don't have my typical microphone or my typical computer here, so with that being the case, this is going to be more of just a log of a work session rather than actually narrating a lot of the brainstorming process like I would typically do. I think there's still going to be some of it, but obviously the audio is not that great, and we're just sort of making do with the situation. So um, the only comment I'll add here at the start is I've been reading a lot of LitRPG recently, and sort of testing out this site called Royal Roads or Royal Road, where you can post chapters. And I'm gonna try my hand at writing a handful of chapters in the LitRPG genre. I'm actually gonna put a little slant on it with a roguelite element, and that's about as far as I've got. It's going to be a school that introduces some of these roguelite elements into sort of a lit RPG framework. So I'm going to try and flesh that out a little bit here. I'm sharing my screen so that kind of the notes and the brainstorming process is visible. Right now, all I've got, like I mentioned, are those few details along with the title of the school, which is going to be Delving High, which I think is a nice little play on words for sort of the dungeon diving, delving type game mechanics that we're going to see. So I will start working on that, and I hope we come up with some neat ideas. I did write one chapter of an earlier novel called Bat Sim High, and this is going to pull a handful of ideas from that story, I think. So I've got actually a little bit more of a starting place than typical, which is very helpful. I also have a general idea for the latter half of the novel, what that arc is going to be. And it's going to be something about the characters getting stuck in the simulation um, and having to sort of survive or fight their way out. Aurora is the name of the AI I had sort of envisioned for Bat Sim High. So far I'm just pulling a lot of details from that story. I've had a few miscellaneous thoughts about some of the mechanics that would be at play here, and I think something I haven't seen in a handful of LitRPG books that I've read is a distinction between perma stats and like other forms of buffs or power, in the sense that I'm thinking specifically here. So so I guess the framework I'm thinking about is the students are going into the sim to kind of practice different skills. It would be sort of the application of each class that they're taking. So maybe they have a class about dungeon diving and another about alchemy or whatever their branch of magic is, or a class about their specific role that they've chosen. And they go in sim to either battle or test out certain mechanics, whatever. And depending on how they do in, let's say they're, diving a dungeon or whatever, depending on how they do, they'd earn a certain amount of experience. And that experience could either be invested in that run. So the student could, use that experience or that gold, whatever the currency is going to be, at a shop or something like that in the run. And maybe they get a really powerful piece of armor or a perk or something like that that's going to help them do better in the run, and therefore help them get more gold or experience in that particular run, or earn some kind of achievement or bonus, whatever. Or the student can save the experience in gold, and they may not do as well in the run necessarily, but they can, after the run, they can invest in perma points, like permastats. So then the next run they go into, or the next sim they go into, instead of starting with, a constitution or a health of 10, let's say, maybe they're up to 11. So I think there's some potential here for an interesting tension between, short-term, long-term game, and how students choose to save or invest their points. I think that could be kind of an interesting mini game to run alongside of the typical kind of, power race, as everybody's acquiring strength towards like a certain goal. This gives a little bit more flexibility in how to get there. And especially in the high school setting, I think giving some of that flexibility where, let's say there's a pretty hot-headed student, they might just go ahead and almost always invest in the run. So they could be doing really well, like run after run, but they're actually not investing in permastats very much. So that leads to like a Mars situation from Red Rising, like House Mars in the first book, where their intent, the expectation of House Mars in that game was for them to be really powerful at the start, and sort of maybe take over a house or two, set things on fire, stuff like that. But they act like a fire and burn out, without gaining any real long-term power. So I think having potential for that, where, maybe it's a rival, maybe it's somebody sort of, I don't know, I haven't gotten there quite yet, but somebody that is a little bit antagonistic to the main character, they could be the one that is super strong right off the bat. And then if they've got some reason to be antagonistic to the main character, that gives us kind of a realistic means to, point some extra firepower against our main character, give them something more to fight against than like the typical student, and add a little bit more conflict into the story. So I think that permastat versus like short-term buffs is interesting. And at least in the ones I've read, I've only read a few of the bigger ones like Dungeon Crawler Carl and Primal Hunter and stuff like that. They don't have as frequent of a shop system, as I'm imagining. So having a little bit of that RNG, rolling mechanic toward the forefront of the story is kind of fun, I think. So let's do some more thinking here and try and flesh some of this out. Perma perks. I'm thinking of, well, a lot of games, but like Call of Duty Zombies. I think it was Black Ops 3 where you could unlock perma perks for doing like super high level achievements. I think having those through achievements is kind of cool. So earn through very difficult achievements or exceptionally expensive. And having that expensive thing, oh, here's something. Let's put this under setting. So if we're having something as strong as a permaperk be buyable, I think it'd be interesting to integrate some kind of, pay to win mechanic. So we could have students, you could actually buy, we could call it gold or experience, whatever that currency is going to be. If there's like a real world trade in where dollars are exchanged for like Aurora gold, then I could see we could have a subset of students that are really wealthy and maybe they don't do that well, but they've got like a weekly allowance or monthly allowance or something, and they're going to actually just be buying these perma perks. I think that could be interesting. I'm thinking about balancing a little bit now, because obviously if you've got some students that can buy perma perks, they're just going to really leapfrog everybody. So what that's making me think of is to adapt Aurora a little bit. So let's put a couple notes on Aurora here. So if students can buy gold, then we need some sort of guardrail to keep the game relatively balanced. I think those guardrails probably need to be tailored a little bit to the context of the world and why there's this sim, why Aurora is the AI in the sim, why there's a high school that focuses so much on this. That's kind of the big question, and that's one I'm not certain of right now. So I think it might still be helpful just to identify a few of these guardrails that could be interesting. The one that came to mind first and what kind of turned me toward this area was thinking about like Dungeon Crawler Carl. The AI is obviously very snarky, very sarcastic. It's got its own sort of angle on the game outside of the actual people that are running it. So I think having something like that could be interesting, where maybe people are buying perma perks and stuff, but somehow the AI has to help counterbalance that a little bit. So maybe it gives a better drop rates to the other students or something like that, or there's a limit on how many perma points can be bought, like per week or year or whatever. I'm not sure which of these I like, or if there's kind of an intersection that's good, but start recording some. I don't really like having better RNG for others. I feel like that's not something that's going to be that satisfying if our student just gets a great drop. That doesn't really feel earned. So I don't really like that. Yeah, I'll have to think about that. I think the kind of microtransaction sort of idea is interesting, and it helps tie the world to the sim a little bit more. But we need to figure out what the guardrails are. Just going to pull the same main character from Battle Sim High over. I think I just sort of like that character. I'd done a little bit of brainstorming on Delving High earlier, and I was considering the idea of having not houses or anything like that, but having squads, and each student is sort of enrolled in a squad, and that's who they're going to be doing all of these missions and things like that with. And the squads being, oh, actually, I like this a lot. Let's get into our plot here. Can't get too fancy while I'm trying to brainstorm. So the first big plot point would be, we'll just call it the entrance exam right now. And that's going to lead to the squad selection. So entrance exam is going to be, I guess let's finish squad selection. So I was sort of thinking from a little bit of an earlier brainstorm that rather than houses, there would be the squads, like I said, and each squad would be maybe like 4 students. It just seems like, maybe 5 or 6 would be a little bit better, but from a narrative perspective, I feel like having a close group of 4 is probably about as big as I want to get. Like if you have eight characters in your squad, it's just a lot to build one up in sort of a realistic, believable way. And each time you're moving the group, it's like, okay, that's just a lot of people to name or to reference and that sort of thing. It's like all the hobbits it's like all the dwarves in the Hobbit. It's this laundry list. But I feel like 4 is kind of an interesting spot. It's enough that you can have plenty of conflict in the group, enough that you can have different classes. You could have potentially squads made up of multiple of the same classes, and sort of there's just a huge number of permutations of like fighting archetypes available here. So I think 4 is good. And my original thought was that squads are self-selected, where there would be a series of combats within the sim, and after each combat, students could select squad mates, and it'd sort of be this self-filtering, probably thing where the best would rise to the top, and they'd all join into like super squads, and then you'd have your mid-tier students, and then you'd have kind of the riffraff left over. And starting with Jack, the main character here in the riffraff, I think would be fun. Start him basically as bad as possible. Give him some inadequate teammates that they're probably pretty good-hearted, but they're incompetent in a lot of ways, or they have they chose horrible classes at the start of this whole thing, which makes me think we need to roll Jack's like class selection into this somehow. I want it to be a little more exciting. Like I feel like starting with some sort of entrance exam is interesting. And by exam, I'm thinking like a combat scenario in Sim. But we also need at some point here to get him to select his class, and whatever other sort of subcategories of that we identify. And we need the other students to do that as well. So anyway, back to the squad selection. My original idea was have squad self-select, but now I'm wondering if this is a place I can integrate another mechanic of Aurora that I had for Battle Sim High, which was the characters are actually named by Aurora. In Battle Sim High, I had Aurora as almost like an omnipotent entity that not only oversees like Sim, but has all of these integrations in the real world. And the idea was to have Aurora name each student with a particular name that sort of hints at maybe it's their personality or their potential or how they are in Sim. So like Jack Stalk, I was like Jack and the Beanstalk. That's where that would come from, but Stalk as in that is sort of reminiscent of like a hunter, like an archer. Tall and I was picturing him as a tall and lanky kid, so like a beanstalk. And then the story Jack and the Beanstalk, he's trying to climb higher. He's trying to sort of exceed his like humble beginnings on the farm. So those are sort of some of the reasons I thought this was an interesting name. And my hope was, and again, I sort of did this in Bat Sim High for 15 or 20 characters, but give each character a name sort of like that. Jack's is maybe a little bit more obvious than others, but give each character a name that sort of hints at some of their components, but maybe it's not that obvious. So the integration would be, where are we down here? Use Aurora to actually choose the squads. And what does that do for our story? That puts more emphasis on Aurora. So if we're having Aurora be more of that snarky, sarcastic AI that's commenting on or controlling the game, awarding loot and achievements and stuff like that, I think having it choose squads gives another sort of credential to it. It makes it more versatile and seem more rooted in the world. So I think that's good. Downside, I could see a nice little arc where Jack collects squad mates. Like we could show Jack as being more compassionate or empathetic than the other students if he's the one that's kind of accepting, the other bottom tier people. Even if he's on the bottom tier himself, maybe he's the one that takes a couple and says like, we need to kind of band together, like we're all suffering down here, we need to try and do better together. That could be good. I could also see we could try to emphasize a different aspect of Jack if he's just thrown into a squad and it's 3 of the other bottom feeders. That would sort of show a little bit more of his resilience or his like willingness or desire to climb. If he's kind of optimistic in the face of that. I think I'm still leaning toward having the squad selection be an arc. So let's just call the first arc like squad, and we could do numbers, like we could give each squad a number, like Bridge 4 from Stormlight Archive and stuff like that. I kind of like having names here. I think that would just be sort of interesting. Everybody likes naming their team, and you can get quite a variety then. It also would be a little bit more memorable. So this is back to the like the tone of the story. If we do numbers, it's going to be much more serious. Like we have, like in the Hunger Games, we have, I forget what they call the groups of the best fighters, but we would start with like squad 1. That would be like the A team, the very, very best students that did super well in that entrance exam. And squad 2 would be super good. Squad 3 would be really solid, and it would just keep sort of dwindling down from there. So that's very much, it's quantifying things. It's ranking. So it's more of a serious tone. But if you let each squad choose their name, then you can still have serious squads where maybe it's squad Pike or something like that. But you're also going to have squad Flamingo or squad Snow Cone or whatever. So you just have some more flexibility there. So that being said, just making some notes here. That being said, I think we need a name for Jack's squad. I do know some of the other people in there from my prior brainstorming. So there was going to be, what was his name? Charlie and Atlas. Atlas Link is one name, and I kind of forget Charlie's last name, whatever I had for him. It's like Chubbly or something. Get that figured out later. And then the other thing I thought of was actually not having Jack's squad, not giving them a 4th player yet, not having like anybody else want to join them. I think that would be kind of interesting to literally have them at a 3-person squad instead of 4 like everybody else. So they're just at a massive disadvantage. Back to that idea of one of Jack's core principles is like this desire to climb, not only to get stronger, but like to, I don't want to say seek the challenge, because this is sounding more like Primal Hunter, the book series Primal Hunter, but something like that, where he, like, we're just trying to emphasize like he's starting from the very bottom here. So we'll need a name for Jack's squad. I don't really know what that's going to be. It's going to be something like that hints at their trajectory, that they're at the bottom, but they're trying to climb, I think. Something like that. So I don't know what that's going to be yet, but we'll just call this first art Jack's squad. So yeah, beginning of the book is going to be all the students get in, choose classes, and then we need to kind of flesh out this squad selection phase. Call it a mini arc, how about that? So the first would be, let's indent all this. So for this squad selection, I would say let's think about having 3 sims with a selection option after each. So what I'm thinking here is we've got 3 different like classes, from Delving High, 3 different classes that are going to have a sim, and each class could be sort of emphasizing a different aspect of what makes a good squad. So if the first class is like dungeon delving, or it's like sieging, or whatever, they're going to have different components that are important, whether it's the importance of attrition or cleverness or whatever. So the idea would be, over the course of these 3 sort of classes, the students naturally choose kind of a diverse team that's kind of rounded and is pretty decent at different things. They've got a variety of classes, and they've seen their other students and a handful of sims, they've made an informed decision about, not only do I want a healer, but I like this particular student the best. So the idea would be over the 3 sims, they'll choose a rounded team. But I like having this option with a selection after each, where we're going to have a few teams that are just immediately selected after the first. So let's say the first sim is like something very aggressive like sieging or like defending a tower or something. We're going to have a few squads that are just like 3 or 4, knights or whatever the classes we want to make. So they're going to be like pretty turbo offense. Or maybe it's 3 like wizards or something, where 3 or 4 wizards, and just there'll be a few squads that are super weighted in one way. And I think that'd be really interesting. So let's see if we can get a couple notes down here about that. And my thought was Charlie is going to be Jack's kind of closest friend at the start, I think. I'm picturing Charlie as more of like a builder, which is going to be sort of an uncommon class, whether we call it engineer or carpenter or something like that. It's going to be not necessarily combat focused, not necessarily support based. It's more of like a situational class, which is going to sort of speak to Charlie's personality of kind of being a very laid back, passive, non-offensive sort of person. Like he's going to be like non-combative almost, which is not a great combo for this world we're creating. So, yeah, I think all I was going to note there was after the first sim, since Charlie is going to be kind of Jack's best friend, I think they need to join right off the bat. I think that'll be an important note that we get Charlie on board. And before that can happen, we need important interaction between Jack and Charlie in sim. Second, I'm going to say Atlas joins the team. He's going to be the tank, in case the name isn't helpful. And third, nobody is going to join. I think what would make this more interesting is if they have their eye on somebody that they think would make a really great addition. Like maybe after the second sim, the squad of 3, they talk to somebody and they're trying to have that person join their team, but that for whatever reason that person is a little bit on the fence and is like, I want to see how the next sim goes, and whatever, I don't want to make a hasty decision. So then after the third sim, Jack and his crew are very much like, okay, now it's time to get this person who's going to totally complement and round out our team. But they've already joined a different squad. So then they're stuck at 3. And I wonder if we need a little bit of guardrail as to why, or a little bit of rationale as to why they don't get somebody else. We could literally say there's some number divisible by 4 number of students, and one student has left or got sick or whatever. So there's literally nobody else. We could do that. Or we could have a subset of smaller teams potentially. We could have like a handful of solo students that are their own squad. That's going to kind of lessen the fact that Jack only has 3, so I don't like that actually. So we're going to forget about that. For now, I'll just make a note, potentially have no other students that can join. All right, so by the end of this arc, we've got Jack doing his entrance exam, which is some sort of combat in the sim. He is going to get his sort of a class selection based off of that. And it needs to do something else other than that. So it's going to establish something. Not his starting stats, I think. I think that's good for, I think his stats should be based off his actual, self. So he's not going to get like more stats or anything if he does well in the entrance exam. But I think it could give, here's what it should do. It should give some variations of the classes. So I'm imagining, if he chooses a bow in the entrance exam, he's not only going to get presented with the archer class to select, but there's going to be variations of it. So maybe it's like a stealth archer or we could call it like a tower archer or something where like that one would have all sorts of skills related to shooting like huge area of effect shots or status shots, stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, we could come up with a dozen, variations of each class, and maybe that's something we can not do right now, but just identify the superstructure. So, so a class. Let's say we have like a very finite number of these. Maybe it's like 7 or something. But that would be like archer, knight, mage, healer, whatever, stuff like that, like the big category. And then we need something that sounds better than sub-role, like variant. I feel like I'm stealing that from somewhere. But something like variant where within archer you'd have, 20 variants. Within knight you'd have 20 variants. Within mage you'd have 20. And I think that's kind of a good way to do it because we can have these recognizable categories where all of the students are going to fit into archer, knight, mage, healer, whatever our other couple options are. But then you get down into the sort of the exponential trickle effect of, but then they chose this variant, and then that variant has, 3 or 5 subvariants that just kind of further tailor the kind of the progression. So I think that would be interesting. We could even, I'm thinking about like majors and minors and that sort of thing. That's not really the language I want to use, but we're in the school setting here, obviously. So to have a little bit of crossover, I'll just put a note here for now. All right. So again, we've got our entrance exam. Jack's gonna choose some sort of archer class from here. I kind of like the idea of not giving a. Oh man, this is tricky. I was about to say I like the idea of not giving a variant, actually, at this point. I think I like that for a couple reasons, actually. So if each student only chooses their class after the entrance exam, everybody's going to be, archer, knight, whatever. So when they're doing these squad selections, they're picking based off of class and their perception of that student. So back to that comment earlier of I like letting the students pick their squads one person at a time rather than all at once necessarily, because they're looking at, okay, here are all the healers. I've got to make a decision about which one I like. If we let the students get their variants right off the bat, then that earlier question becomes, okay, here's all the healers. Which one has the variant that I like? And at that point, we're playing into the more serious, number crunching game, where I think since we're leaning into that high school element, what we really want is to lean into character and some of those other tension points besides, just the level ups and the big numbers. So what we do instead, and I hope this can work well, is we just give the class after the entrance exam, and then students go through the squad selection. They're choosing based on class, but also on their perception or their reading of that student. So it has to be somebody they like, right? That's important. But also they're trying to imagine what sort of variant that student would unlock. So there's like a few degrees of refraction occurring here as people are trying to imagine like what's the best squad they can fit in. There's kind of the social hierarchy going on, like, okay, I know I'm not that good. I'm not going to be able to fit in with the A-listers probably. So I'm looking at this subset of the B team. Who do I like? Who is a class that I need? Who might get a variant that could fit well with my like ideal play style or whatever. So I think that would work really well, and what would be kind of a natural point for that variant would be after the third like squad selection sim. So at that point, the squads are finalized. This will be like kind of a higher, not emotion, but just a kind of a climactic scene where everybody's unlocking their variants. Squads are finalized. Like people should be either really excited, really upset, whatever, depending on how that goes. And then these variants get unlocked, and suddenly, like, a squad of two knights, a healer, and an archer, all of a sudden becomes, a electric knight, dark knight, like void walker, and or a healer or something. So each squad just gains like a ton of flavor at the same point. So I think that would be really interesting. Now, I know I have mentioned avoiding some of the number crunching and the seriousness. I think a lot of those exist in isolation. Like we want to avoid purely, like students purely making choices based off how it's going to affect their performance in there. I think one place it would be interesting to have some of that quantifiability would be to have like a leaderboard. because it could show some interesting progression. It's literally like a representation of how good Jack's group is compared to the others, but also I think it would provide some really neat kind of social tension where as Jack's group is moving up or down the leaderboard, that's going to cause friction with students that are getting displaced or that are jumping over them, and it's just a kind of a neat talking point that can run in the background, add a little bit more depth to kind of the system here. So I like it to show the squads. We could call it score or gold or level or something. I mean, it could have a ton of... Actually, I like this a lot. Hold on. So I would like for the leaderboard to show lots of different things. So we could imagine maybe by squad, it's going to show like total gold, total score, which may or may not be something different. I'm not sure if that's going to stay. Like total level, total number of monsters slain, certain number of like rarity of achievements or something, whatever. But the neat thing, and that I think would give us some flexibility down the line, would be like people can look at this leaderboard by squad, or you can look at it like on a individual student basis. And I have the sense that a neat arc for us is going to be, Jack's introduced into this awful squad. They're going to be toward the bottom of the leaderboard for sure. But as we're getting better, we could show Jack's individual position improving, even if his squad isn't getting a lot better. Maybe he's rising up and all of a sudden he's sort of got some of the achievements and the stats of like the A-listers. I think that'd kind of be interesting, and then that gives us a dynamic of, he's kind of the best of his squad, and maybe that's going to present some conflicts or some opportunities, whatever. Maybe another squad is going to try to like recruit him or trade for him or something. So that's something to think about. Can squads trade students? I feel like they should be able to. That's just going to make for some interesting possibilities if students can be traded. Probably makes for a lot of resentment from the old group, but it'd be interesting. All right, so we've got the bare bones of our first arc figured out here. By the end, we've got our squad of 3, I should note. They've got their variants. The only other things I think we need to do in here would be identify kind of the rival. I've been imagining this as a student because when we get to our second half, somebody is going to change kind of the settings on the sim that Jack and his squad get sucked into or put into, and instead of it being for complete level 1 of this dungeon, it's like complete all 10 levels or something. Like it's going to be some absurdly difficult thing. I guess before we get into that, I should note the other thing I was thinking about was that for our setting here, well, I guess we can put it up here in RPG mechanics. There's going to be permadeath as well. So I'm thinking, and this is actually a thought I had earlier today, that students would somehow be awarded like 1 life in Aurora, which is, I think, maybe it sounds a little bit better than just calling it sim over and over. But they have 1 like character life. So I don't know if character life is the term I want to use, but they're giving 1 like hero life. How about that? Better. I don't know if that's the final thing, but something like that. So they have 1 hero life. If they die, they're they have to play as a different like role in the game. So that might be like a shopkeeper, an enemy. They have enemies that are actually from people. Or I just had a wild thought, but I don't think we want to go down that road right now. Yeah, enemy would kind of be the main one. But depending, let's flesh this out a little more. Depending how well they do for their hero life, they have better options for replay. Yeah, let's call it replay. So I think I like this. It's like if we have a character that does super, super well, when they die, they might be able to replay as like a boss, like a really strong enemy boss. And depending on how they do as the boss, they may be reborn as like another boss, or it could be like if they just do very poorly, they're going to be reborn as a basic enemy, and then so on and so forth until they're like they can't even play the game. But I think what I like about this is it gives a sense of stakes. Obviously, if you die, then it's like your time as a hero is over. And that's obviously very, very serious. So I think having that as like the backdrop of the story is helpful, because we are trying to lean into character as much as possible, and without making it completely a numbers game, chasing stats. We have introduced this extremely serious element, so I think that's a nice contrast. And then having this trickle effect of replayability, I think could be interesting, especially if we think about. So let's go here to Delving High. We're gonna have like the hero. I'm just gonna call it campus for now, but hero campus, enemy campus, and something generic. But what I'm imagining is we're starting at the hero campus, and the idea is if somebody dies, then they, like the actual person, will go to a different campus. So they'll go to an enemy campus where they're like training to be an enemy. Or actually, hold on, let's consolidate this. That would be much better. Yeah, that would be way better. So instead of having different like schools, we could actually have them all at Delving, and then let's say random student dies as a hero. All of a sudden they have to drop out of like dungeoneering class, and now they're like jumping into dungeon defending class or whatever it's called. So they're learning a different curriculum. And when they go in sim, now they're not, a knight or whatever. They're going to be some sort of enemy mob. And now, it's like the tables have turned. So they might still see their old friends like at school, in the cafeteria and stuff like that. But it's like they were actually now battling in sim instead of being on the same side. And as I'm thinking more about this, what I really like is we could start with all the enemies being like AI, AI controlled, which is kind of the default you'd expect in a lot of these stories and stuff. And then when the first like character dies, we'll sort of see them as like a more clever or more whatever, different enemy than what the AI typically is. So they may still be the same type of enemy, but they're going to act completely different. Maybe they can speak, maybe not, but it's like it's going to be very noticeable that all of a sudden, wait, there's an enemy that was this former student. And I think as the year goes on, there's going to be a handful more that a handful more students that die in Aurora. And what I could see happening is like, let's say especially, sorry, I'm just getting a lot of thoughts here. What could happen is, if you remember, we had those kind of turbo groups, those turbo offensive groups. Here we go, down here. From the first sim, there's going to be a few squads that are formed immediately, and it's going to, 4 knights or 4 assassins or whatever. And they're not going to be very defensive. They're not going to have much utility. So at some point, they're probably going to be super high on the leaderboard because they're just kind of slaying everything, doing great. They're going to be doing super good, and then they're going to die because they don't have flexibility of a traditional, squad. I lost my spot here. So then when they die, they're going to replay as enemies. And here we are. When they are, replay as enemies, they could still be they could form a new squad, basically, or be the same squad, but those hyper offensive, personalities are gonna do something like, be a pack of hunters, like enemy hunters. So maybe they're whatever sort of creature we want to come up with, but we could sort of create this looming threat in the background of Aurora that there's always this group of, 4 really aggressive, really sneaky, former students that are, current students, but they're now playing as enemies, as mobs. They're sort of hunting and trying to take down the others. So I think the sequence there would be this is what we want to do. So let's get into second arc. Let's call this the third arc. So super bare bones, but one student dies, replays as a boss, and the student needs to have something very distinctive about them. So that we see that when they're playing as the boss. So then let's call this whatever, wolf pack for now. A few more students die. See more recognizable enemies. Ooh, and I wonder if the enemy they become should be based off. Yeah, it should be based off of their class. So if they were, let's say, like a fire-based healer, that's everything, then their enemy should be some sort of utility-based thing with fire, a fire aesthetic, or fire abilities. So that's a mechanic we'll want to communicate in these first couple of students that replay as enemies. All right. So then the big thing here would be thinking about the repercussions of having students actually play as enemies, because that may run counter to what I want to happen in this third arc. A solution would be to have students sort of create an enemy that the AI controls. So it may be like a unique enemy with unique abilities and a unique look, but it's still played by the AI. Because if the students are controlling these particular enemies, then it's going to take a lot of fear away from the third arc, where or here we go. I think this is it. So when this rival student puts Jack and his crew into the sim, right, the idea is the student's putting them in there in an impossible situation so that they die and they lose their hero life, which is like a non-refundable, once, like it's only given once by Aurora, like it's something Aurora controls, nobody can change it, whatever. When the rival student puts them in there, they can deactivate some setting that says like, enemies controlled by students. So these, super powerful enemies that have been sort of accumulated through the second arc are now controlled by the AI. I think that's kind of the way we can do it. We can get around it. Because if students are controlling the enemies, they're probably not going to want to kill, Jack and his crew because they've been unfairly stuck in here. Unless if Jack is kind of responsible for, this would be kind of juicy. I'm going to say, unless if Jack's responsible for killing that like alpha offensive group. I could see, like I'm imagining maybe there's a boss fight and Jack, like this offensive group is like, taking out this super big boss, like it's the biggest boss, we've seen yet or whatever. And Jack's the sneaky archer type guy, so he's snuck up and is watching. They've almost got it like finished off, and he does something to, like confuse them or catch them off guard or whatever, and then they end up getting wiped. Jack goes in and finishes it off, and this is like the big power spike. So, yeah, I'm kind of seeing some of the plot come together here. Let me get this down before I keep talking more. So I think that could be the sequence that gets us to the third arc. So this group's about to take down the big boss. Jack does something to confuse them and interrupt them. They all die, and then since this boss was almost dead, he actually kills it, and that's where he skyrockets up the leaderboard. Gets some good loot and stuff, and then whoever this rival is, is probably going to be good friends with the offensive group. Maybe if we go back to that idea of buying levels and stuff. That offensive group could also be like from a rich background, or have kind of a personal connection to the rival. So they're going to hate that Jack, knocked out those 4 hero passes, and is going to be trying to figure out what sort of revenge they can do. I'm wondering about the logistics of somebody changing the settings on the sim, and is that inconsistent with Aurora totally controlling like the hero lives? Maybe the sim settings, I think it's okay that the sim settings are adjustable by person. They need to be, but we need to implement some kind of like security clearance. Obviously students shouldn't be able to set like a sim to like it can only be ended once the final level is passed. Like students shouldn't be able to lock themselves into an unbeatable thing. So we need some kind of high security clearance. Thinking a bit about Harry Potter, and like if there's a sort of a Snape figure that doesn't is closely aligned with the rival, doesn't like not Harry, doesn't like Jack, that teacher could use their clearance to change the settings. And then we're gearing up for the third arc, being Jack and his crew surviving this big challenge. They gain a ton of levels and loot from beating it, even though they should have not have. And then the cherry on top is this rival student and the teacher get booted out or whatever. I think that'd be good. I think that could be. We're super weak on these last 2 arcs. Trying to how far we've been going. Only an hour. Okay. So the wolf pack, this is really, it's just a detail. It's really not an arc that they're running. We need to sort of integrate. We need to integrate that into the third arc here. So this is delving high, and I think the emphasis of this school is on dungeon diving. So I think our sim here should be like a very difficult dungeon dive. I'm thinking like 7 levels or something. This is obviously not going to be Dungeon Crawler Carl, where we spend a book on each level. I'm reading that series right now and super enjoying it. I don't really know about the levels right now. I'd have to try and come up with some really neat ideas and see how many of those I can come up with and basically do that. But what we want to do is we're gonna have the wolf pack. That's what we're calling them. The wolf pack students actually sim in, kind of like that verb, sim in, and hunt. So the idea would be last level. So over the course of the levels, we have some brushes with them. Let's let's say we slay 1. Last level, final boss, plus remaining 3 wolf pack. So I think this is good. It's like kind of a natural power progression. So we have the wolf pack hanging around the first few levels. Maybe Jack's team sees them, like staves them off, keeps them away, whatever. Somehow they kind of get a lucky break and slay 1. So now it's down to 3. The purpose of that is to show like how difficult it is to actually, beat them. And what we should add here really quick in the second arc. Yeah, Wolfpack gets lots of kills, gains levels. So by the third arc here, the Wolfpack themselves, they've really leveled up a lot, and they're extremely strong. So to kill 1 is really lucky, or is really tough. So that's the point of our bullet here is, if we can get 1, it's going to set the tone that, hey, there's still 3 more out here, and they're not going to fall for this same mistake that probably took, most of the squad's firepower and resources to do. So we're just kind of building up the odds like, boy, these levels are getting harder, and the wolf pack is still there. We've used our good stuff, like we're totally toast. So this is going to be like the low point, hopeless a little bit. And then the finale, of course, I think has to be final boss fight, and like the last 3 wolves are gonna like join in. Like what would you do if you were the wolf pack? You wait until the squad's occupied with the biggest possible threat, where they're at their weakest, and then you do some type of surprise attack. So our final like combat scene in Sim is this boss fight plus the 3 wolves. So it's like totally impossible. We're gonna have to figure out a good way to beat them. I think part of what'll help is Jack is clever, and he's gonna assume, like after they kill 1, let's say we have a little bit of hinting going on that this is what the wolves are planning to do. So he's gonna know that they're planning to do that, and with Charlie's like engineering class, they can prepare some really like clever or really good things ahead of time that are going to help in this boss fight. So we will go in with some special strategies probably. So then they beat that. We have some kind of celebration. We have like loot, gold windfall, where they just completed something that they should not have been able to do as a first-year student. They're going to get all sorts of crazy bonuses and stuff, I think. Or actually, here's what would make it even better. Loot deactivated in settings. Yeah, that's actually outstanding, I think. Let's do it like this. So, right, the jerk move from the rival would be to deactivate loot. And let's say there's like a few subsettings of loot. So it's like chests, chests, mission completions, better write these down. But there's loot awarded for achievements, and that's controlled by Aurora. So that's not a setting that can be deactivated, it's ingrained. And with this, I think this does a couple things. When we get into the third arc and they're stuck in the sim, immediately we're going to find out that there's no loot drops, and that's just going to make the whole crawl, even harder. I think it's going to be almost impossible. But more importantly, that's going to stop this huge windfall from happening. If we just jump from like a level 1 power level to, a year 1 student power level to a year 5 student power level, I think it's not going to feel that satisfying. I think the slow progression feels better. So by deactivating this loot, we stop a big windfall. We make the rivals seem worse, but we also present some opportunities here where we can have Jack and his crew doing really specific things to win achievements so that they can get loot. So it's not only just survive in the dungeon or complete the level in the dungeon, it's do it with style, or do it in a unique way, so that you can actually get some loot. I think that's kind of a nice compromise. Yeah, I think that's decent for the third arc. We're gonna super need to flesh out these 7 levels or however many there are. Make them unique, feel different, feel hard in their own way. Second arc, there's not a lot here. Right now, it's really just the revealing the enemy mechanic as a student dies and they replay as an enemy. We need a big movement for Jack's group. I'm kind of debating whether or not they get a 4th person or not as this goes on. If students are getting wiped, from their other squads, there's going to be this constantly reforming mechanic going on where students are joining new squads. They're losing old squad mates, they're trading for new ones, or they're joining new ones themselves. So there's certainly going to be potential. Certainly going to be potential for it. I could see easy ways we could push or pull Jack's group to get somebody. We could give them a perma-perk, an achievement-based perma-perk or something that says you completed a mission with 3 squad mates. Power plus 30% while your squad remains at 3. We could do something like that actually incentivizes them to stay at 3. If we want to go the other way, we could do a compassionate route and say, let's say a different squad, 3 people get wiped, and somebody they really like is the last person. Nobody wants to take them into their own squad. Jack's crew could take them in, get up to 4 people. Not quite sure what I what I like right now. I don't know what our big thing is here. It could be leaderboard progression where they're trying to stay above. We could implement some tension and do a divergent or something where, let's say the bottom 2 teams get dropped every quarter, or not every quarter, every couple of weeks or something. Could do that where, they have to fight to survive. What do we want to do here? I think, what's the big picture? We're trying to, this world is trying to sift through all the students to find like the true heroes that kind of deserve to be in Aurora. And I guess this gets to like the root question I still haven't had any good ideas on, which is like, why is everybody in Aurora? Is it entertainment based, like Dungeon Crawler Carl? Is it? I mean, it could be back to my original idea with Bat Sim to shift all aggression into the sim so that the real world doesn't get blown up. It could be that, and that would sort of go in line with the entertainment. Like, we're going to incentivize people to do everything aggressive in sim by making it a huge entertainment thing, with the rationale that this isn't just entertaining, it's saving the world. Because people are fighting in there and not in the real world, which is not a thing that I think will live long in this story. I think there's going to be a lot of conflict that spills into the real world. So I think that could stand. I think that's all right. Let's add a couple notes here about that. And I think we need to add like a lottery type thing where people are able to get a new hero life. It's got to be like super rare, very difficult, but I think having that loop would be interesting, because at some point we could bring back, like, let's say there's a big enemy that has been really important to the plot for a while. I'm not necessarily imagining this for the first book here, but like long term, there could be a really key enemy that is part of the landscape of like book 2 or whatever. If that person gets a hero pass or whatever, then all of a sudden they're back, and like there's a huge shift that occurs. So I think having that potential is good. Okay. I could see, here's an idea actually for the second arc. Let's say the idea is Aurora has determined there's a ideal ratio of heroes to enemies or something like that for this first year. So the idea is, they're doing these classes, they're learning, but it's primarily just competing in sim and getting stronger. It's like hands-on type stuff, and then maybe the teachers are involved in like assessing or helping train. But the idea is Aurora has already determined, let's say there's 100 students at Delving for first year, or 1,000. I mean, we could scale this however we want, but let's say 800 are supposed to move on, or 600, or maybe it's 500. Maybe it keeps sort of going down by half for a couple years until like, only 50 sort of wind up in like the post-school Aurora sim. So Aurora knows, let's say it's 500 students need to survive the year. So 500 don't. So what happens is, like week 1 of the semester or week 2, whenever we kind of get through this squad selection, in week 1 or week 2, there's a particular power level that all the enemies are at. And then the next week it increases a little bit, then it increases again the following week. And the idea is that Aurora is kind of moderating the enemy level versus the average student level, so that it's some sort of projection. It's like by week 15, the end of the semester, we're going to end up at 500. And I think that could be the arc. It's like just try to survive. And I like that a lot better than dropping, the bottom squad or the bottom 2 squads, because then it becomes a student versus student thing, which I think could certainly work. But having kind of this like agnostic AI as the bad guy, I think that's a better like looming threat. It just feels a little bit more like some of the dungeon diving stuff I've been reading, and really like that. So I think that'll work. We'll call it the pass rate. How about that? Okay. Yeah, so that's a quick line. Just in case you're only listening, I said Aurora's determined the pass rate to be 50%. The difficulty is gradually increasing to achieve a 50% survival rate by the end of the semester. Very simple line, but I think, if we flesh that out, like if I can take a couple hours with that idea, I think you could have a really interesting 100, 200 page arc where we're doing a series of sims, series of challenges, and squads are falling all around us. We're assuming the wolf pack gets killed early, so they're actually going to be responsible for killing a lot of these other students. That's where all their levels are going to come from. We've got this hyper threat that's building in the background, like outscaling a lot of the other students. So maybe there's almost like a snowball effect that's starting to happen. I think it would be really cool to show that visually. Like maybe the students in the wolf pack start off as, not pups, but like not super aggressive, not super intimidating. They're smaller, they're weaker, but as they get more kills, they get bigger and bigger and get abilities and magic and whatever. So I think for us for now, this is enough. We it's just a matter of hours to get this concept fleshed out into, here's 8 really cool missions that we're gonna use to show like the scaling difficulty, the students falling, Jack's squad, getting closer and closer and sort of bonding into this group, fleshing out the rival. So I think my time for today is sort of rounding out. So I'm just going to make a few notes here about what needs to be delved into. So the rival, first of all, needs to be rounded out. You need to know who they are, what their background is. I'm assuming it's going to be, rich or powerful in some way, mean, prideful, or Doesn't necessarily need to be prideful, but that would just kind of make them less likable, which is helpful. So we need to flesh that out. As a quick side note, I mentioned earlier about the Royal Road. I'm doing this more as a test of me writing in the genre and just having fun with it. So I'm not that concerned about really fleshing out the outline that much. So with that being said, if I were super serious about this book, I would probably say, let's go and identify or create like a list of all the variants of each class. I don't think we need to do that. We'll just sort of do it as needed. Come up with cool stuff. So I'm not that worried about it, but we do need to choose Jack's squad mates variants, because that will kind of be important, and I sort of feel like I need to know that up front before I start showing them in scenes, because their personalities and their fighting styles and stuff like that is gonna show in those variants. What else might we need to think about? Second arc. Combat scaling. And how his squad progresses from a character perspective. But I guess really I should just probably think about the first arc, most of all. Entrance exam is going to be some kind of combat. We're going to do our classes. He's going to have stats. He's going to choose archer class. Suppose I can do the variants backwards here. I don't need to choose Jack's squad mates variants first. I can actually just write their scenes, and as long as they have a consistent personality and style, then when we get to the variants later, I can just adapt them there. And then the big sort of looming thing is everything we've talked about here is what's happening in Sim. What's happening actually at Delving High in the real world? I don't think I want to spend a lot of time at Delving. It's just like a frame story. I don't want it to hold the same weight as Jack's squad, but I think it'd be really interesting, if we imagine like the second arc, one of the students dies, and then all of a sudden it's like, we're going to see them in the cafeteria again, but now they're like they're wearing maybe the hero students wear a certain uniform, and like the enemy students wear a different one, and the like each faction of the school or whatever is going to have their own kind of uniform. That would be interesting. Even just having Jack's squad fight something, like they're fighting a troll, and then they complete the quest or the assignment, whatever we call it, and they're back at Delving, and it's like, they're not wearing their armor and stuff anymore. They don't have the same sort of confidence or skills that they do in Sim. I think that'll be an interesting contrast. Obviously we don't really have any details of that fleshed out here, but I think I'll just sort of treat that as needed, and just if it feels like there's something interesting I could show back at Delving, we'll do that. Otherwise, we're almost treating this like whatever that isekai or something, the Portal Fantasy, where we're really just living in the Sim in Aurora, and if there's something interesting to show back at Delving, between the students or a teacher or whatever, I think we go back to do that. But otherwise, we just stay in the Sim and treat it like we're just jumping from assignment to assignment almost. So I think that's the big picture. We've got kind of a decent outline here, a couple interesting, details about the world. I'm probably most happy about seeing some kind of overlap between, I'm not sure where I put it, but some sort of overlap between entertainment and the kind of world protection idea that I had from BatSim. I think that's an interesting crossover where the rationale of why do we have a school that's teaching these kids how to fight in sim, and why is everybody so tuned into this whole sim idea is because we're delegating all the conflict into it. It's quote unquote saving the world, and it's also very entertaining. And then of course with that, it's like we can associate a lot of resources and power and prestige and stuff with how well people do in the sim. All right, well, I think that's a good place to stop today. I better try and do a little bit of writing here. The goal is to get a few chapters of this written and start releasing them on Royal Road. See if anybody is interested in reading them. So thanks for listening, and I hope this was interesting. Thanks.